Hello everybody. Today we're talking about Magento apps or extensions as they're called on Magento. So how are you going to launch your app on Magento? Is it worth it? You might be in the middle of the process of already developing an extension for Magento, developing an app. You might be researching, you might have a Magento app and you're wondering, how can I basically market this better? How can I create a better onboarding experience? Today we're going to explore the different things to evaluate when basically talking about Magento. So I will go through basically the 5 points that are, first of all, the market potential for your e-commerce app for Magento. Second of all, the marketing channels you can leverage for your Magento extension and app. Third, the product features that are possible to create for Magento stores with your app or extension. The merchant onboarding experience is point number 4, which we'll go through. And lastly, we'll look at the documentation, look at the actual effort and difficulty around actually going about and building a Magento app and extension. So first of all, we're going to go through the market potential. Magento was recently bought by Adobe Commerce after having been in the hands of eBay for some years. It's the biggest system out there, open source system at least. So there's definitely a lot of potential. A lot of stores are using it. They are not growing as rapidly as they have been before, but they are probably the most used open source system still out there. And the interesting thing about Magento is that they are basically they are being used by merchants of all sizes, however probably focused more on medium and large merchants. So typically merchants will start off on another platform, and when they reach a certain size, they will basically turn to Magento because it just has more robustness, more functionality than many other systems out there. Many stores, however, also if they are existing retail companies, they might decide to launch straight away on Magento. So there's a lot of stores on here. There's a lot of potential for your app and your extension. You can see some of the big brand names here that are using Magento. Of course, because it is the biggest, there's also a lot of competition around extensions and apps. There's a lot of developers and companies out there building apps using the strategy, but nonetheless the potential is huge, of course, and this is internationally, so Magento is used around the world. Of course, a lot of stores in the US use it, but it is really used everywhere, and it is in the top 10, I would say, probably in more or less every single country in the world, in terms of at least as far as what we see in our market insights, which we're happy to show you and give you access to. You can basically click a link below the video here to request access to our market insights of commerce systems. But that's basically a little bit about the market potential. Now the next step you want to look at when you evaluate or plan out your app strategy and your e-commerce app strategy is, what are the marketing channels that are available, what is strong for Magento, and of course you have the Magento Marketplace, which is where merchants basically find the different apps. This is at least one of the channels that Magento provides on their own, and since they've been purchased by Adobe, you'll also be able to have your app featured on the Adobe Exchange, which of course is a separate channel and an additional channel you can basically leverage. And because Magento is the leading open source system, you have a lot of other channels that you can leverage, from agencies to publishers that publish the most used or most interesting e-commerce extension and apps for Magento. You have a bunch of other channels. You should definitely rank yourself on Google and a lot of other channels. There's a lot of community going on, a lot of forums that is very relevant, can be relevant to fuel up your marketing, and of course you need to use the data for your sales team if you're selling directly to merchants. So those are some of the main channels, but of course, as I mentioned, you probably want to go ahead and get listed on the marketplace when you basically develop an integration, an extension, an app, whatever you want to call it, for Magento. Also here, feel free to reach out and talk to some of our experts that help launch apps and market them day in and day out. We've done that for hundreds of apps, onboarding hundreds of thousands of merchants across basically our portfolio. So going into to point number 3, the product features. Since Magento is an open source system, you have a lot of flexibility around the product features. Of course, you can integrate and get access to all the different data that is available in the system, either via the APIs, or if it's not available from the APIs, you can actually build the extension directly in to make sure that you can both read out any data point that's in here, and you can also basically add in a lot of different data points if you want to write data back into Magento, which is of course very relevant if you want to offer features inside the admin space here. So you can basically do that quite a lot. You can see here you can add on your modules to show up directly here over in the admin. You can also add them on to show up in the product detail pages. You can create a lot of different variability here if this is part of your strategy. You might have a strategy that basically puts features inside Magento itself, or you might have a strategy where you pull the features and the operations into your centralized SaaS or service dashboard, basically. What you can, of course, also do as a third step is you can integrate any kind of feature set. Again, because it is open source, you have a lot of flexibility to integrate features into the front end of the store, whether it is the storefront itself, whether it is the product pages where you can get basically features to show up, whether it is the cart or the checkout. If you want to add in a shipping solution, a payment solution, a dedicated voucher, you can do a lot of different things in the checkout, in the thank you page. And that basically gives you a lot of flexibility with your app. Of course, you need to think about what is the scalability behind your app if you do that, because it needs more maintenance. There's compatibility challenges, so merchants will use a lot of different templates. The more you have in the front end, the more you will have challenges and support, basically work to do with the merchants when they're onboarding your solution. So you need to think carefully and craft your strategy. We always recommend that companies start out with, if they have a SaaS dashboard or a service dashboard, they should definitely provide most of the features inside that dashboard to start out with. Start out with a very lightweight app and extension to get some traction, to get merchants on there, to make sure that the simple features, the lowest hanging fruits, are taken care of, they are functioning properly. And if the merchants are really requesting it, they will definitely do so with you, and you can then add on some of the more advanced features that take more support based on actual evaluation of the commercials and whether there's actually a business case for you behind it. We've seen too many companies that just launch with a fully fledged everything, with features that integrate with everything, and what typically happens is that it might be useful for the first 1, 2, 3 customers, but then it doesn't really scale because the onboarding experience is simply too hard and too difficult to get going, and you don't have the expertise to roll that out. And that also takes me into to point number 4, which is the onboarding experience. So there's obviously, as I showed before, there's the marketplace, there's the app exchange where you can go through. You can also see here in Magento directly, you have the possibility that, which is also a kind of a marketing channel to be featured right in here. What you need to take into account is, of course, that we're talking, in many cases, you can of course create a API integration only, but if you have a extension and an app that you build that goes into the system, you need to take into account in the onboarding flow that this is a different flow than if you build an OAuth flow for eBay and Shopify or any kind of cloud-based system where an OAuth onboarding is very simple. For the merchant, this is not much harder to basically find and upload an extension in here, but nonetheless, it is something that you need to take into account when you basically create the onboarding experience, because the merchant needs to go in and basically upload it or integrate it in here. There's of course different ways to again do it. So you can make it API based, or you can make it extension based. It is fully dependent on your product features. Most of the things are supported. All you need to do is basically make sure from a strategic standpoint that you pick the right way to create the onboarding experience and the feature set, and then roll it out. And that is something that you also need to take into account when you look into how to actually build the integration and the extension, right? So if you look at the documentation, now let's go into step number 4. How difficult is it to build a Magento extension, a Magento integration? Depending on how you build it, if you build an API integration, it is it's obviously okay documented. It is not best in class, but nonetheless, there's a lot of experience out there. It is, however, a system that can handle a lot of load. So you need to take into account there's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of details that is not common kind of sense. So you need to dive a little bit into the details. If you develop back-end or front-end integrations here, there's also different guides available, of course. It is very specific, and you want to make sure that you follow these things to create the best experience for the merchant. And that is something you of course need to take into account when you develop your overall strategy, right? Because you need to dive pretty deep into these different systems if you want to be if you want to have a Magento extension that actually has a nice onboarding experience, that has a nice feature set and stuff like that. And in that regard, we're happy to help out if you need any kind of input on how to build it, where to build it. If you need a developer at your site with experience, if you want to have input from our app marketing team, from our market insights team, or basically our merchant onboarding team, which is doing nothing else. You can probably hear it from all the things I'm describing. We're doing nothing else than basically researching, defining, planning, launching, and designing e-commerce apps for hundreds of different systems, and helping companies launch and have success on these different systems across the world. So feel free to reach out if you want a little support. And instead of having to develop apps for all the different systems, you can basically develop one integration with our integration platform, and we'll then be able to launch apps with a few clicks without having to do all the hard work and do all the learnings on your own. And go through that over a period of months or years, but simply basically define it once and then launch integrations for different systems as they are relevant to you from a business standpoint.